we are going to create authentication with the help of passport. So let's go in NestJS documentation. So I'm going to open the documentation from NestJS website. Here if I go in, I think it is in techniques. Okay, so it's not here. If I go in recipes, yeah, so if you see here in under the recipe we have passport. Now in the passport, it is saying that we need to install NestJS passport local, and since I will be also implementing JWT authentication, so I will also have to do install these two libraries as well, npm I and passport local in NestJS passport NestJS. Let me just do one thing. So passport hyphen local is a strategy. You can find so many strategy in passport. I mean, in passport's original website. So let me just type passport JWT, and here what I can do, passport NestJS JWT, which is a helper module for passport JWT here in this NestJS. And these are just dependencies, and apart from that I will also have to install dev dependencies. So for especially for these two, passport local and passport JWT. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna install dev dependency here. So for dev dependency I will use -d, and we'll type nest type slash passport local and type slash passport JWT, and that's all. I think that was it. Yeah. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create one folder here. I will name it strategy. Inside the strategy folder I'm going to create one file, local strategy.ts. Here I will create a class, export class local strategy, and I will have to extend it with passport strategy, and we will have to pass, this is a method and it will return a class. So if we pass here the strategy, so since we will first this file is for local strategy, so we'll have to pass here local strategy. Don't import passport strategy, I mean passport JWT strategy. So just make sure that you are selecting passport local here. All right, now so what we can do, we can initialize constructor, and in constructor, when we use constructor and when we are inheriting from some class, then we will have to use super. And in super generally we pass configurations, but if we want to modify the username and password, in that case we'll have to configure the username field and password field. So in our case, I just wanted to make sure what was our username. So our username is email, it's not the username, and password is password. So password is the default word in passport.js, but for strategy, local strategy, they consider it as a username as default word for the username field. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna use username field, and it should be email. Password I will leave as it is, since by default the password here configured as password. Okay, next there's a validate method, and this is the method it will be triggered when we'll be using what we can say the guard passport guard, when we're using auth guard of passport, then this local strategy will be triggered and it will execute this method. And here we will be getting the username. We can write it email and password. Once we get email and password from validate, we can do all the validation checks here, and then we can return from here if user exists, or if user doesn't exist. Okay, then what we are going to get is in auth controller we will configure this guard here, and uh, what is going to happen is like authentication will be taken care by the strategy itself, and when it will reach to this endpoint it will have proper user. Like if it user exists, then it will receive, then this endpoint will be triggered. Otherwise will throw an error from here only. Okay, and once it reaches, I mean this line executes, means we already have the user. We can then run any method to generate access token. Okay, okay, let's do this, then it will be more clear. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna inject my auth service here, const private read only auth service, and then auth service. I'll also make this class as injectable. Now I'm going to call this service validate user method, and we are going to pass email and password in this method. And if I go back in this method, if I notice, if I check, I mean this method, you will notice it is returning user if the password is correct, otherwise null. Okay, then if I save user in user field, okay, so if there's no user, then we can throw what we can throw, we can throw a new unauthorized exception. So it will not trigger the next method in executions, I mean sequence, or what we can say next middleware. So the next middleware would be this method. So what it is going to do is like it will return unauthorized exception response from here only, and if user exists will return user from here. And then what is going to happen here, we'll get user here in the request. We can extract user from the request. So what I'm gonna do next, so once this is verified, it will execute this method, and then uh, now instead of extracting this from body, now we will need it to extract it from the request. Okay, okay, so here we need to attach guard as well. So what we are going to write, auth guard local. Now what will happen when it will come to this line, it will do all the stuffs written here in the validate, and if user is there, then it will trigger this method. And here in this since the user is already validated, what we can do, we can do auth service dot let's say login. In login, what we can do, we can pass user. Let me go back in login. Okay, so in login, what we can do, instead of like just verifying whether there's a user, what we can do, we can generate access token. What we need to do here is we need to use JWT module. So let's import the module whichever we are going to use, in auth module. So the first thing, since we are using strategies here now with the passport, we'll have to import passport module, and then we will also have to import JWT module, and we will have to use register async. Then we can use again we can use factory. Okay, and here what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna write imports. I will need to import config module. Okay, and then we will be defining use factory. And since we need to use config service, so I will be using config service, and this would be of type config service. And to get this parameter, I will have to write inject, and in this I can write config service. Okay, fine. And why this is giving the reason behind that is we are not returning anything. Okay, we'll fix this. Before that, if I go back in common, uh, okay, if I go back in common in config, we created auth config here file along with the database config. So we are going to use this. So actually we call it as namespace, and if we if you want to load all these properties, then we can use this namespace just like we used it in database. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna configure config module for feature auth config. Okay, and this config module I might be needing in this module as well, in auth service directly in other files. So let me import it here as well. Okay, now since we have configured it, now we can also use these properties. Now these properties will be available on config service. So next what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna define uh, use factory. So whatever response, whatever options we wanna return from here. So there are few properties like secret. So I will write config service dot get string, and then this will be auth dot, what was the property name, JWT secret. And then there's another property, sign in options. In sign in option we need to define expires in. So we have this expires in, in environment variable such as JWT expiration. So we have created a property, custom property for this JWT expiration. So we are going to use this one only, and I'll write get string, and then auth dot. Okay, fine. Next, what we need to do here, it looks fine here. And now what I'm gonna do, since we have imported JWT module and passport module, now we can use JWT service. All right. Okay, using this JWT service, we can create access token. So in logins, since we are getting username and password from request, so we can type request.user, and this user is actually already validated with the auth guard, so we don't need to do any further validation. We are going to directly generate access token. So here we'll have user. Okay, so we'll be using this way, since we know like inside this user might be having one of the properties from this response user DTO, so it's okay to use partial of this one. And this error is coming because we have used user twice. We have initialized two user variables. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this and I'm gonna write access token, and then I'll use this dot JWT service dot sign, and then here we need to pass payload. So what we can do, uh, in payload we need to pass one subject. Okay, so generally we do subject and user.id, and then email. I can attach any I mean any number of fields, but here generally we attach important fields. So right now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna attach the two things, and once we will finish the role, we will also add the roles here. Okay, so we'll come back here and attach roles. Now that this access token is created, and this would be a promise. No, since this is a synchronous method, so we don't need to define it as await. Okay, and we can simply return access token, or just access token from here, and we can type access token. You can also name it as camel case, in camel case, that is also fine. Okay, so now this is done. So, let's verify this, and yeah, we can test it now. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start my server pnpm start. Let me open my the Postman, and here I already have this login URL set up. So I will just try to trigger, and I'm getting some error as well. So let me verify what error I'm getting, why this is happening. So we might have done some mistakes, probably because we might not have since we have created this strategy, right, but we haven't registered it with the module, so passport.js is not aware of it. Let me just put it in provider and see if this works. Although once you extend this with the passport, it is now automatically registered. You don't need to export it in to use it in another module. You don't need to export this. It will be registered throughout your application. Let's try this, and if this doesn't work, then we'll try to debug. Okay, now this is working fine. Okay, what we are going to do in next video, we are going to use this access token to configure, like we'll see how we can automatically attach this access token in all the protected routes instead of manually copying and pasting it in bearer token. So instead of that, we are going to use environment variables, and it will be automatically attached.